Hello and welcome to another Daily Digest video. I am Ross Merriam, and today I have a bit of a strange brew for Modern, something that you might be familiar with, Mono-Red Aggro, because it seems to exist in every format. But this is sort of a different take than we've seen on it in Modern. Mostly you see really heavy creature Bushwhacker decks, and we do have Reckless Bushwhacker in this version, but there's also Young Pyromancer and enough spells to try to support Pyromancer, to make enough creatures to make Bushwhacker good, and the spells are cheap, so we can Surge Bushwhacker. So there's a lot of different parts that are trying to merge together, and I'm going to see if it fits. Hopefully this card, which has seen some play in Standard, but not a ton, is better in Modern. This hand, however, is somewhat sketchy. We're on the draw, and the thing we're missing is something to bridge the gap from Bomet Courier on turn 1 to Hellrider on turn 4. Given that we have a 4-drop, we're going to want to wait a while to sacrifice the Courier, can't empty our hand that quickly, and we want a lot of creatures in play to make this singleton Hellrider great. We do have bolts to fill in the gap in the curve if we draw 1-drops, and if we draw 2s and 3s and curve out naturally, I think that'll be fine. So while this hand has the potential to not be very good, if we don't draw that well, I think the potential, if we draw only reasonably, we don't have to draw that well, just reasonably to be great is enough for me to keep it. So I will keep. We'll see what our opponent is up to. They're on the play. How lucky. What do you got? Misty Rainforest, that could mean anything. Misty Rainforest Go is definitely better than Misty Rainforest something. Drew a land, which is okay for our Hellrider. Seems like our opponent sacking this Misty to try to get some F6 value. Yep. Just gonna get their shock land tapped. And a blue-green dual land. Not exactly sure what that means. Bant Eldrazi, I guess? No 1-drop for Bant Eldrazi is very nice, though. Do not see a Noble Hierarch or Ancient Stirrings. Oh, no, this is a voice. Okay, so not Eldrazi. Not Eldrazi. Probably a company retreat deck of some kind. That's fine. It does make our Bomet Courier poor. This card is definitely bad against decks that are trying to block with creatures, but we did draw 2-drops. So I think I'm just going to play Pyromancer here, then Bolt a bunch on turn 3 to set up Hellrider on turn 4. And that sounds like a fine curve, even though we don't get to attack right now. I think Pyromancer was almost the ideal draw there. Granted, Voice was probably the least ideal creature for our opponent to play in turn 2, but c'est la vie. A 4/4 Knight. Well, now we have some options. I'm definitely going to play Burning Tree into Bolt, but I can either take care of both halves of Voice or the Singleton Knight. And I think taking care of the Singleton Knight is actually better. Because the Knight is so threatening. Either use of the 2 bolts deals with 1 blocker. And while the Voice can trade with a creature and then generate another blocker behind, the Knight is likely to just eat creatures that we cast, especially this Hellrider. So next turn we play Hellrider attack. This Knight is likely to be big enough. In fact, it already is big enough to eat the Hellrider. So the Voice leaving a creature behind when it trades is no worse and is in fact better for us than the Knight just being bigger than anything we have. So I'll play Burning Tree, and we'll let that ability resolve, and a little bit inefficiently deal with this Knight. But even though we're 2-for-1ing ourselves, the Young Pyromancer is leaving us a little bit of value behind. Now, I could attack with Pyromancer this turn, but my opponent is likely to trade with Voice anyway, and I'd rather get in the extra trigger with Hellrider. So once again, I'll pass. But now we have a board of 5 creatures, which is about as good as we could have asked for this Hellrider. We're gonna deal a lot of damage next turn. So yeah, that looks like a collected company, which is unfortunate, but yeah, I think we just have to go for it here with the Hellrider and see what our opponent does. Reflector Mage would be rough if our opponent has that. Oh, they're accompanying in response? That likely means Spell Queller. Oh, they just have the Spell Queller! No! Oh, man. Oh, and we already used our 2 volts. Ugh, that's so tough. I don't know if I should have sequenced this game differently because now we're in bad shape. I'm not going to attack this turn. I'll attack next turn, and if the Queller gets into combat, we can shock it. But oh man, that Queller was rough. A little surprised that they wouldn't have held up Queller last turn when they had Knight. Maybe not that surprising me, but it's so tough for a deck like ours to just not cast our spells, you know? Um, Once again, in a bit of an awkward spot with the Township up. So our opponent can now put the Queller in front of, say, Bomat Courier, and the Voice in front of one of our 2-power things, and then activate Township. But if they do that, so the Voice will likely be in front of the Pyromancer. We can just exile Simian Spirit Guide, use it as a mana, shock the Voice so our Pyromancer lives, and then sack Bomat Courier before damage. Get 2 cards out of it, deal our opponent 4 damage, and then see where we go from there. And I'm fine with that. And that seems like their most likely block. If they get a Collected Company here too, then, I mean, so be it. But there's only... We're behind. We can't really afford to play around a lot of stuff. See if our opponent makes the blocks we expect. Well, the sort of the inverse, I guess. And now I'm still willing to do the same thing because that'll kill the Spell Queller. Our opponent could have some way to save their Queller, but you know, again, can't play around everything. Just gonna make the most efficient plays I can and hope they're good enough. Let the shock resolve. Good, that didn't get quelled or accompanied in response. That's nice. We can sack this. And then this is going to work out well. If this ends up being... Ooh, now I can mutagenic growth and save the young Pyromancer. Sure. Pay 2 life. Does make our shock a little redundant, but I think having the Pyromancer in play is certainly better than having the growth in our hand against a deck whose removal does not depend on damage. See what our opponent has here. Oh, I guess I didn't think this through. They can activate Township here and still trade for the Pyromancer, so we're essentially just making a 1/1 with growth. Although they did not opt to do so. Okay. Yeah, I will cast Allrider. Thanks for asking, Moto. Okay, they just want to deal with the Hellrider. But if they hit Queller off this company, they could have dealt with the shock to begin with. I guess then we would have had the growth, so they're really just trying to wait until the last possible moment. Still a little surprised that company didn't happen before blocks. But we'll see if it works out for them. We're not in great shape yet. So we would have been in fine shape if this Hellrider could just resolve, but that is not in the cards right now. We have 3 creatures in the graveyard with the Bomat Courier for that Scavenging Ooze to eat. Our opponent's at 12. And this is, once again, looking fairly grim. Really couldn't afford to hit a land there off that Courier. Needed that Courier to be great, and it was only good. Although, our opponent down to 2 cards, 3 after their draw step. They don't have a huge clock here, but Township is sort of a clock in and of itself. Even if they don't start attacking immediately, every turn their board gets better and better. Pyromancer is a fine draw, because we're going to have to try to go wide around this collection of creatures from our opponent, so hopefully we can draw some spells to make some elementals. Oh man, another Collected Company, sure. Sure. Another Queller. I guess that's fine. I can still draw Bolt to get our Pyromancer or our Hellrider back. And then attack with 7 creatures. That brings our opponent to 5. With 4 blockers, that brings our opponent to 2. That's within range. Well, now 3. Okay, they're quickly getting out of range because of the ooze. Yeah, too many spell callers this game, it appears. And maybe something else. Okay, yeah. Corsair Crucifix, that's fine. We have maybe a turn or two to try to draw out of this, but Swift Spear is definitely not going to do it. And in fact, because it has haste and we have so much mana, I'm going to hold it in my hand in case we draw a Reckless Bushwhacker. Maybe that does something, but even Bushwhacker here does not seem good enough to get us out of this hole. We'll see another Ooze activation on end step here. Oh, or not, I guess. But I don't think that matters much. Yeah, Tracker, play the land off the top of their deck. Sure. Man, drew pretty well from our opening hand too. Just couldn't really beat a Queller with how he's sequenced, and it's possible I could have put them on it, but really tough from my spot. Well, I don't really want to go to 6 and have myself dead on board to a township activation, so I will chump the ooze. I'm not willing to trade so many resources off that the ooze dies, though. And yeah, there is just nothing that's going to get us out of this. Game 1 to the away team. And man, this looks like a standard sideboard. What is going on here? Granted, I like some of the cards. Our opponent is certainly likely to have something that gains a bunch of life, some creature. If it's Kitchen Finks, then I don't really want Skullcrack, but if it's something bigger like Obstinate Baloth or Thragtusk, then Skullcrack is a lot more attractive. I do like Karizev's expertise. Our opponent's trying to block a lot. I think a threaten effect is actually quite good. I don't like Blood Moon. Our opponent has a bunch of mana creatures, and this card always has the potential to win games, but I don't think it's going to be good enough. I don't even know what Fling is doing here. You have such small creatures. I don't really get that one. Maybe I'm missing something, but for now, I think I'll leave the Skullcracks in the sideboard, and the games are likely to slow down, so I think cutting some Simian Spirit Guides makes sense. Maybe I want to cut a Mutagenic Growth and leave another Ape in, just so I don't cut too much mana. Growth is not great. It does help us set up some attacks through one blocker. Just pump the blocked creature to let it live, or maybe pumped an unblocked creature for extra damage, something like that. It's not like Mutagenic Growth is bad, but it's not something I want to draw in huge numbers. And speed is a big part of what this deck does. That just turning 1/1 sounds reasonable to me. Don't want to over sideboard. I will play first. Another hand that needs some help off the top. The one of Hellrider looks pretty poor now when we've gone from a 3-lane hand to a 1-lander. Oh man, if we draw a land the next turn, this hand is pretty great. We get to Emissary, Pyromancer, have Bolt the next turn. This Bomat Courier our opponent has to deal with, but we're at 18. We have 18 lands left in the deck and 2 Spirit Guides, so it's 20 out of 53. We're under 40%. And that number is just not good enough in Modern. Any stumble gets so punished. Well, we're getting extra punished now. Mulligan and no-lander. Our opponents get 7. How nice of them. Certainly I'll keep this 5. It's quite functional. Well, Bushwhacker seems quite good. We can Pyromancer on 2, Emissary plus Bushwhacker on 3. Have a shock, sure. Hopefully I get to shock a turn 1 mana creature here. For a 5-card hand, that's better than I could have expected. Please shock yourself. There we go. Oh, wow. No play. They're holding up Path? Holding up Path? Huh. That's the only card that I can think of that they would hold up. I don't know why they would. Pathing on turn 1 is so bad, but they have to have a path here. I'm not going to play Pyromancer into it. I'll just make them waste their mana like I'm wasting mine. Pyromancer is so valuable with spells. And I can hold up Shock for a blocker here, as long as it's not Voice. Please play an Ooze here. Help us out a little bit. Thank you. Well, they still have the path here, but that's fine. I get to shock end step into 2 creatures. Perfect. And then next turn I'll have Pyromancer plus Bolt because of the land they give me. And hopefully I don't draw another land for the rest of the game. And cast a Surge. So, this game is not going that badly. Whoa! They didn't path anything. Now I just don't know what's going on. If they would just shock themselves and not path to prevent any damage. Oh man, I'm so confused. So very confused. Did they really not want to path? Well, awkwardly enough, them not pathing is awkward for us. Because now I can't Pyromancer plus Bolt here to get through the Courser. And spending my entire turn here, sacrificing presumably a Burning Tree Emissary to deal 2 damage, and then play Emissary Bolt myself is really not appealing, but I think it's better than giving them the Courser and play. The Courser is going to gain life, 2 life with this Flooded Strand. So yeah, I will do it. Take 2. I have another one. We're going to have to really claw for these last 2 points. Our opponent, we know, has a Flooded Strand in hand, and there it is. Down to 7, and we're down a Shock and a Bolt. Okay. This is a Eclectic Company. Lucky for them. So, I can attack into the Eclectic Company and let whatever creature they find block. Or I can play a spell into it and let them find Spell Queller. But I'm inclined to force them to company as early as possible. So let's play a spell. Just gives me more information before I make another decision. Yep, not surprised. Brick. Man, they hit Spell Queller every time. Okay, well, not going to attack into a 2/3. I will just pass the turn. Still think they have a path in their hand, and they were just too proud to cast it. Ugh. Selfless Spirit just makes the prospect of killing Spell Queller, or her Ooze, actually, with 3 creatures in the graveyard. Man. Maybe I should have attacked. Just they likely would have eaten a creature with the Queller and then taken 2. That's just not relevant. So how do I win from here? Well, I think it involves casting my spells. But I do think I want to keep the Swift Spear. Yep. If I draw like a bolt or something, I can kill the spirit after playing Swift Spear, attack with a bunch of things, maybe get in a good chunk that way. That might be a way to win this game. A little surprised for my opponent here to use the Scoos on end step instead of on their turn when I was tapped out. I guess they have Spirit, so they're not vulnerable to Lightning Bolt anyway, but just good ops. I think we will be just about done here in a minute. There's one more creature there. Sure, I'll take 4. They're going to play some other giant creature here to block Vexing Devil. They have another collected company, and well, you have another Coco, and you Coco into something giant. Good for you. I don't know. This is the path we thought they had. Sure. And unfortunately, I have now drawn another land, so attacking is not in my future. Didn't exile their Courser. That suggests they have Eternal Witness in their deck. Wouldn't be surprised if that's a one of. And yeah, they just have 5 cards, tons of stuff. Play Pyromancer, pass a turn. We're pretty much dead here. This matchup is definitely going to be tough for a deck like this. Any Bushwhacker deck against a deck with similar speed, it's always going to be a little slower, but a deck that starts on 1, floods the board quickly with creatures, but those creatures are a little bit bigger than yours, just size slightly ahead of you. It just makes attacking so tough. You need very specific draws, and very explosive and fast draws to get out ahead of them. And we just haven't had that. Yeah, a bunch of attacking here. I think I do have to block just to stop from dying next turn. So let's jump. And yeah, just nothing we can do here. Well, a quick 2 games with our Mono-Red Aggro deck. Certainly the underpoweredness of it shown through in that matchup, but also definitely a deck that is not geared to beat Noble Hierarch Collected Company style decks. This is a list that is trying to beat combo, trying to race them effectively, trying to beat slower controlling decks, Death Shadow decks, things that are really aren't going to be able to block as well because they have a lower threat density and are going to be more vulnerable to just the fast beats. But maybe a deck that is a little bit more resilient to discard spells than Burn is, because you're not reliant on adding 3+3+3+4 over and over again. You do have some more recurring sources of damage than a regular Burn deck, but definitely more vulnerable to the Noble Hierarch type decks. And you saw it there. Hope you enjoyed that, and you can come back and see me on Wednesday.